Investors worldwide are attracted to the Chinese market, and the Chinese regime has been dangling it to entice investments like a carrot in front of a donkey. To many, the lure is irresistible. Many Western companies' decisions to invest in China are often supported by the work of various experts. Using proprietary methodologies and analytics, leading consulting firms, accounting firms, and industry analysts project and predict the growth and potential of the Chinese market. Even during the pandemic, they continue to predict the Chinese market will be the growth engine of the world. But if the data they use is supplied by the Chinese Communist Party, and if they are under pressure to avoid sensitive issues, isn't this the blind leading the blind? Hi, welcome to my show. I'm Lei. China has made an effort to collect data, conduct research, and keep track of trends and social issues in the West. It's easy to do because we're an open society. Data and information are transparent. However, we know very little about China, not because we don't conduct research, but because the data we have access to is notoriously massaged and unreliable. But that's not the only reason. We've been spoon-fed information and analysis favorable to the Chinese regime by our own highly trained professionals. Consulting firms, accounting firms, and analysts are not telling us what's really happening in the Chinese market, partly because they don't know and partly because they choose not to know. They've been crafting their studies and findings based on the narratives favored by the Chinese regime. Dr. Fu Xianyi at the University of Wisconsin-Madison is an expert on Chinese population who has been exposing the loopholes in the official data for over 15 years. Dr. Yi said that when population studies are based on fabricated data, it means that all the research based on this data is false. So the research papers published by scholars from these studies are worthless. And an entire generation of population scholars have wasted their time. By the same token, if the consulting firms and industry analysts are using unrealistic data about the Chinese market and are selective in presenting their findings and analyses, isn't their work also worthless? We're not talking about just a few analysts' efforts here. We're talking about the work of several professions. In January, Morgan Stanley published a 200-page report predicting Chinese consumer spending to more than double in 10 years. It gave 4 rationales for the growth. 1. Greater government emphasis on policies to support the domestic Chinese economy. 2. Increases in household income. 3. Further growth of urban areas. And 4. Changes in technology and demographic shifts. If I paraphrase it, it's basically saying that by continuing to build a digital society, as well as following the Chinese government's great policies and efforts, Chinese people will see higher household income, particularly in the urban areas. What? Is this really the work of Morgan Stanley? I'm speechless. Morgan Stanley isn't alone. Consulting firm McKinsey published a special report in November 2020 with the goal of providing perspectives on the trends that are defining the next norm in post-pandemic China. And it concluded that Chinese consumers will keep China as the growth engine of the world. It's a substantial 158-page report full of graphs and charts. But I must say it's so detached from the real life of Chinese people and the reality of Chinese society. Even if they used the official data, which isn't real to begin with, they would have come up with a different conclusion. In my last video, I mentioned young people's lie down or lie flat movement, which advocates a do-nothing lifestyle with minimal material possessions and low desires. Experts say that the lying flat movement is young people's unyielding reaction to hopelessness in China. One reason that young people feel hopeless is the skyrocketing real estate prices and high level of debt. The China Economic and Social Data Research Center of Tsinghua University released a report in April showing that China's housing price to income ratio in 2019 rose to 9, far exceeding the internationally accepted range of 3 to 6. The same ratio in Beijing, Hainan, and other places is as high as 19, meaning your home costs 18 times more than your annual income. The high real estate prices in China have made it impossible for young people to own a home, no matter how hard they work. Also, Chinese citizens' debt has been growing at an unprecedented rate of 22% over the past 5 years, which is the fastest in the world. In addition, their credit card overdraft balance is high, at 1.5 times that of the United States. The high debt has cut disposable income to very low. When debt goes up, consumption goes down. The amount of money Chinese consumers can spend is low. Now, the numbers I used are official Chinese data. The real problem could be worse. The second reason young people feel hopeless is the hostile environment, unfair competition, and lack of training related to the labor market. Many big tech companies, including Huawei, Pinduoduo, JD.com, and Alibaba, adopt a 996 work schedule, which means working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. Alibaba's founder Jack Ma once said that to be able to work a 996 schedule is a blessing. But the highly stressful work environment has been deadly. A few days before the Chinese New Year, a 22-year-old woman at e-commerce giant Pinduoduo died after collapsing at work at 1 a.m. in the morning. A few days later, another young person from the company committed suicide while visiting parents. A third employee who criticized the company's culture was later fired. What's making young people feel even more hopeless is that employees older than 35 are considered too old to keep up with the 996 schedule. In July, Huawei announced that it would rather pay 1 billion yuan to lay off 7,000 people in China, most of whom were 35 and older. In late August last year, Tencent broke the news that employees older than 35 will be advised to leave. A healthy young labor force ensures economic productivity, consumption, and creativity, but the Chinese labor market has been in dire situation as it's losing young people. A report recently released by the National Bureau of Statistics shows that the total number of migrant workers in China decreased by 5.17 million in 2020 from the previous year, continuing a 13-year downward trend started in 2008 at an annual decrease rate of 3%. Migrant workers are the farmers who leave the countryside and take manufacturing jobs in urban areas. They've been the backbone of the Chinese manufacturing industry, but they are aging. From 2008 to 2019, the proportion of migrant workers over the age of 50 rose from 11 to 25%. The blue-collar labor shortage survey report released this past January showed that recently, 2/3 of companies have experienced labor shortages, and another 13% of companies have labor shortages year-round. 90% of the companies suffering a labor shortage attributed it to young people's unwillingness to engage in blue-collar jobs. Unlike their parents, they do not want to do labor-intensive blue-collar work. In addition to the blue-collar labor shortage, enterprises also have an increased demand for skilled workers and technicians. However, the education system is out of touch with industry and has failed to prepare students for the job market. Even though there is a shortage of labor in manufacturing, China's unemployment rate for young people aged 16 to 24 increased to 13.6%. The ongoing problem of a severe labor shortage and high unemployment rate shows that there is a disconnect in the economy. When speaking to the press, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said on May 28th last year that 600 million Chinese have a monthly income of 1,000 yuan, which is about $150. 600 million is 43% of the total population. His words sent shockwaves across China because people suddenly realized how poor their countrymen are. In the face of a broken system, a A young person said this recently on the Chinese internet. "I want to lie down with self-esteem rather than kneeling without dignity." In a way, this young person is more courageous than large professional firms like Morgan Stanley and Mckinsey. I hope his words can enlighten and wake up corporate America. This video is part of a series called Misconceptions About China. You can watch my previous video to get more information on the Lie Flat movement by clicking here, and click here to watch the video on the Chinese population and labor shortage. Please support the young people in China by sharing this video, and I thank you.